we continue with our farm to bedside, and very exciting time for all of us, and I trust you will have something to take away with you. My name is Brilene Chitsunge, as introduced by Dr. Belinga, and I've got my colleague Dan as well, who will speak to you later. So I'm going to be speaking to you. I'll just project a few slides, and I'm going to be focusing on cultivation and also about the strains and good practices and good manufacturing practices. I'll project the slides now. Right, I trust everyone can see now. Right, so this is our cannabis talk of the 2025. Right. My name is Brilene, once again, as I have already introduced myself, and I just welcome you once again. I'm a medicinal cannabis cultivator, and also I serve as the Pan-African Parliament, which is the legislative body of the African Union Food Security Ambassador for the continent. So today we explore how sustainable practices and quality control in cannabis farming can be a game changer in the African agriculture. We'll also focus on cannabis strains, their clinical relevance, and the agricultural and manufacturing best practices to ensure safety and efficacy. Just a quick overview. Cannabis, as you all know, is a rising solution in African agriculture currently. And then we also discuss the importance of sustainable practices in cultivation. And our topics, we cover the chemovers, the cultivars, and clinical relevance, and the good agricultural practice, which we term as GAP, and also the good manufacturing practice, which is the GMP in cannabis farming. We need to understand, to have a better understanding of the cannabis genetics. I'll just touch on it briefly, as my colleague Dan will go into great depth about it. And so I'll just touch a little bit on it. So we're talking about cannabis strains, the overview, the cultivars and the chemovers. And we discuss about the THC, the tetrahydrocannabinoidal, and the CBD concentrations. We also touch a little bit on the terpene profiles and entourage effect. And then also the importance of genetic stability, which my colleague will also go into further detail about it. And so therefore, we got mainly the strains that we're going to be concentrating on is the indica, the sativa, and the hybrid strains. I trust you all still can hear me. The internet is a little bit unstable, but I trust we're still on the same path. So cannabis comes in these three primary categories: the indica, which is mainly for relaxing, the sativa for energizing, and the hybrids, which combine both indica and sativa to give the effects. The THC and CBD balance determines psychoactive or the medicinal effects. The terpenes add complexity and therapeutic nuance. Stable genetics ensure consistency in patient outcomes. So you can see the pictures there of the different cultivars that are there, and you can actually identify some of them, like your sativa being very thin and narrow, and the indica strains, the leaves are a bit more on the wider side, and then the hybrid. So you can kind of like see the clear difference, the difference on the screen that I'm projecting on there. And as we move on, we then look at the clinical applications of strains. This one, I'll just touch very briefly on it also, as my colleague, Dr. Sandra, will be going into greater depth about the endocannabinoidal system and exploring, talking to you about that everybody's born with receptors for cannabinoids, but she will go into a much greater detail with you. Clinical applications of strains, clinical relevance of strains, strain-specific effects from chronic conditions, the high CBD for epilepsy, anxiety, For example, the shallots worb, which is a famous the strain that you've heard about. I'm sure most of you have heard about the shallots worb that that our little girl called Charlotte, who had epilepsy and multiple seizures on a daily basis, and basically everything had been tried on this little girl, and then the parents just then came across the shallots. Well, they call it shallots angel, but there's the shallots word came over, and they started using that on the little girl. Then the epilepsy reduced, the seizures reduced a lot in a day, and she's still there. She's about 15 years old now, and we've now also got a very good strain of a CBD strain called Shallots Angel. I think we might have lost the PowerPoint. Just a sec. I'll try and see if we can pick up on the PowerPoint now.
Still see
I'm
the
not so sure if you're
PowerPoint.
still able. Sorry?
See the PowerPoint. It's
We
fine.
still got the PowerPoint on, yeah? It's
Yes.
fine, okay. So we on the clinical applications, as I was talking about the Charlotte's Angel, and also the THC-rich strains, chemovers for pain, and also for sleep disorders, amongst others. So the importance of patient-specific formulations, as I said a little earlier, that my colleague, Dr. Sandra, will be able to speak to you in more depth about it, as these chemovers, they react differently from person to person and also from the age groups as well. So it may work very well in one person, but in the next person, it might take a bit of time to work or to work fast. So that will also be explored by my colleague when she goes into a greater depth when she talks about the whole endocannabinoidal system. So as I said, different strains, they address different health conditions. High CBD strains are effective for epilepsy and also for anxiety and many other conditions as well. The THC dominant strains, they help to manage the pain and also insomnia. Personalization is key in treatment, and research is essential to guide clinical decisions. That is why at the moment there is so much research that's being embarked on. Clinicians, scientists, academians, everybody is busy now with a lot of research and trying to get products for THC and CBD, what works for people. But without any research or clinical studies, we have nothing to talk about. But I'm so happy to announce that we are making a lot of headways across the globe, identifying the different cultivars that work for different conditions. Anecdotally, we know that it works. We've had so much feedback, but now we need to now get it into the research and development programs, and then also come up with the drugs, as I said, and also dossiers, which are very important, that the regulatory authority, they want you to do a product dossier, which you can now use for your laboratory, clinical laboratory studies, and then you take it to the clinical studies. But then again, my colleagues will also be able to talk to you in great depth about that. So we now move on to the good agricultural practices, which we call GAP. Why is it important? It's very important for us to look at safe pesticides and fertilizer uses. Without those being managed correctly, we'll end up encountering problems. We at El Paso Farms in South Africa, a licensed facility, we look at the integrated pest management control, where we use different ways of identifying different pests. It's very important, and also other ways of managing the pests, like, for example, we use also natural things like garlic. We grow a lot of garlic on the farm, and we take the garlic and put it in spray bottles, and that also works very well to also avoid using too many artificial pesticides. And also by just growing certain crops like marigolds, like certain flowers outside your your cultivation premises. That also helps. It deters the pests to go. They're attracted to those flowers that you grow. So that also minimizes. The fertilizers also very important. So our suppliers, we ask them to supply us with like their standard operating procedures and the manuals, how their fertilizers have been, how they've manufactured their fertilizers, because it's also very important because you don't want to end up with any contaminants in the fertilizers. So when we get them also, we also send them to the lab to test them for heavy metals and also any other unwanted contaminants. So that's the very starting point, because without managing your pests and your fertilizers, it's a huge problem. Equally important is the grow medium. The grow medium is basically where you're growing your plants. We know we've got different types. We've got coir, cocopeat. We've also got there's clay. Clay works very well, and soil. It works well when you're going in the open field. But the minute you take the soil and put it in a pot, it doesn't work as well as the grow medium, because you need to have a lot of aeration. So we also can sometimes use a few stones, but those stones you need to make sure that you have no contaminants in them, so that there is a lot of free drainage, because you don't want to waterlog your plants. It's a very sensitive plant. If you put too much water, it creates a lot of problems. You get like your root rot, and also you just flood the plant and it's not happy. So it's very specific. It likes certain growing medium, it likes certain amount of water. So the water management is very, very important, how much water to put and when to do it. So it's very strict. So you need to adhere to strict policies that you manage your water as well, very well. And of course, whilst we're still on the water management, you need to check the temperature of your water. It's also equally important. The pH of your water is important. The EC, which is your electric conductivity, the amount of nutrients that you actually add into the water for your plant. So at a certain age, you start with a very low EC, like when you're looking after a baby, you start very little amount of food, but highly nutritious. And then as they get bigger, you also now add extra nutrients. And when you get to the final stage, the flowering stage, before harvesting, you need now to reduce the amount of nutrients. So we kind of like call it a flushing exercise to reduce the amount of feed that's in the plant, because you don't want it to have a lot of food at the very last week. So so you just basically stick the food over time, then you flush at the very end. Um, that's about the water management and the nutritional and the grow mediums. Then, of course, worker hygiene and training. Why is it important? You don't want your workers to come in with contaminants. So they have to adhere to strict rules, strict policy of how they clean themselves before they come to the facility, and also their personal protective gear, including your hair nets. You don't want any hair and then finding keratin in your product. You don't want any beard, so you have to have beard covers, and you have to have your gloves, you have to have your sleeve covers, and then your shoe covers. All that is very, very important. And most importantly, the training that you avail your workers. It's very important for them to understand the reason behind you asking them to maintain very good personal hygiene. It's all part of the success story for coming up with a very good product, which is contaminant free. And if anybody is sick, they have to be booked off work. If they have cuts and so forth, you need to also make sure you move them away from the facility so you don't have any contaminants from that either. And we're also looking at record keeping. Good record keeping is very, very important. You need to ensure that you keep your records, and that's part of the success story as well, because you got a reference, and also the regulatory authority, especially here in South Africa, they're very strict. They want you to keep your records. So if you have to update anything, you still have to keep the old records and then just update and date them. So again, part of the training with your workers is to ensure that they manage the record keeping. Record keeping in terms of like how many times have they watered and when do they water, what pests have they encountered, what fertilizers have been used, what grow mediums, everything that we've talked about is all very important and it's got to be traceable. So we talk about traceability. We'll try and also put some slides on tracking and tracing, which I'll talk briefly about as well after this one. And so basically, to sum it up, the good agricultural practice is all about sustainable, safe farming. It includes your water quality, your soil fertility, your pest control, and your hygiene. So as we said, workers must be properly trained and that they must understand. And every input should be recorded and to be traced back to if there are any issues. So the good agricultural practice, it ensures that cannabis is grown ethically and safely. So we're now talking of the role of quality control, which is all part of the whole sequence from seed to the bedside, from farm to bedside, as we call it. So ensuring product quality. So testing for potency and contaminants, very, very important. You need to test to make sure that the potency of your product, if you say it's 15% THC, it's 15%. If it's 12%, it's 12%. If it's half and half, 7% and 7% THC, 7% CBD, it's very important to test those levels. And also equally important to test your contaminants. So we have an in-house testing tool to test the potency and also to test contaminants. But then after that, we also send it out for third-party verification to ensure that while we have tested it, is it in line with the outside testing tools as well? So which is very important. So good records, and we keep the records here. And then we also talk about genetic verification, which my colleague will go into more detail about that, how important genetics are and how they can be verified, that if we get something from Germany or from wherever, are we able to verify the genetics? So that's also equally important, but my colleague will go into more detail about that. We talk about microbial activity, as we mentioned earlier, the heavy metals, the pesticide testing, and the role of the certified labs to do all the checks and balances, which is also very important. So basically, quality control starts from seed selection and it continues throughout to the finished product. The labs, they check for the THC, CBD levels, as we have said. We also test for powdery mildew, for mold, for bacteria, for metals, for viruses, and much, much more. Genetic consistency also matters to ensure patients get what they are prescribed, which my colleague, Dr. Sandra, will go into more detail about it when she comes on her session. Certification and traceability are very vital. So what is good manufacturing practices? We spoke about good agricultural practices. Now we're talking about the manufacturing practices. Once we finished for the cultivation, when we now move to the manufacturing. So the standards, it starts with a clean facility and proper workflows. What we mean by proper workflows, you need to have a one-way system. So if the product comes in through this door, the finished product cannot go back in reverse. It has to go through the next door and out of the building as a product is formulated. Why? Is because we try and avoid cross-contamination. You talking about a clean facility. So as you bring the product into the extraction facility, you got a lot of dust, a lot of all sorts of things, depending on what you're using, ethanol for extraction, or you're using CO2. So you've got a lot of dust and a lot of dust that you don't want to end up on your product. So the proper workflows are very, very important. And also the airflows, how the air flows in the building. So regulatory authorities are also very strict on things like that. They want to see which direction the airflow goes, and that also forms part of the whole success story. So your standard operating procedures is just basically if I give you an SOP right now, you should be able to come in and read the SOP, and you should be able to carry out the task that's on the SOP. If it's about seed selection, you should be able to know how you select the seed and how you get up with a good seed. And if you're now talking about propagating it or cultivating it and cloning, you should be able to know how to do it just by looking at the SOP without having to get anybody in the room to show you. So you know what is required when you're cloning, or your PPE gear, your razors or your blades that you're going to use, your rooting hormone or whatever exercise, or the tissue culture, which my colleague will go into detail about, into detail as well. So it's very important that all these are addressed. So we also talk about packaging and labeling. Very important, because then obviously if your package is not of good standard, you can end up contaminating your good product that you've already formulated. So it's equally important to also do stability tests on your product, on your packaging, on everything. That has to be also regulated by the regulatory authorities, because you can end up with a package that will allow moisture in, and then by the time your product or your medicine gets to the bedside, it's already contaminated, and it can be it can have some toxic effects, and you don't want that. So the labeling protocol is equally important. It needs to be clearly labeled so that you are maintaining the standards. So it's about standardization. So it's very important to ensure that your labeling is correct and it's also checked. And that's why here in South Africa, for example, there has to be a responsible pharmacist attached to every site. So the work of the responsible pharmacist is for them to be able to check on all that. That is it the correct drug, the correct product, so to call it, that has been put in the correct packaging, and the labeling is the correct labeling, and the dosage is the correct dosage, and anything that is relating to it, like for example, to say if there are any side effects, what will be experienced, or that the regulatory authority also requires you to have, like any other medicine. So also storage, we talked about packaging and labeling. So storage is equally important. So we try and do like stability tests for like keep a product for 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. Why do we do it? To check if it's still the same as it was from the day one when it was packed. Have we lost anything? Is it disintegrated? Or are there any contaminants? Has it dried out? And that's how you know that your product is of good quality and your packaging is the good quality and your label has not also come off. So that's also very equally important. And of course, the transport control. It's a valued product, which is also regulated by the INCB, the International Narcotic Board. They sit in Vienna, but they control all the narcotics that are moved globally. So each country is given a quota to say how much you're allowed, because they don't want you to then export to a country which has already got their quota. So it's really highly controlled. So that's also on the movement of these narcotics. As you know, THC falls under the narcotic umbrella. So it is a narcotic, so it's controlled. So it's about transport control, about ensuring that when you transport it from country to country, you get an import license from the country that is importing the product. And then you send the import permit to your regulatory authority. They then issue an export permit with clear details and where it's going and how much is being exported. And only after that can you export it. And then, of course, you use the different transportation modes, whether you're flying it out, whether you're using the courier system, whichever one you use, but it's all got to be controlled and reported and documented very clearly, and also very traceable. It needs to be traced as well, so that it doesn't end up going to the wrong country or to the wrong hands. So, to just sum it, the GMP, which is your good manufacturing practice, it governs how cannabis is processed after cultivation. It mandates sterile conditions, very sterile conditions. Clear procedures are mandatory. Proper packaging, also very important, and secure storage is equally important. So the regulatory authorities require you to have very strict security within your growing facilities and within your farm, so to speak, or the space where you are keeping your product. So cannabis must meet strict standards to be safe and effective. I hope we're still all following through.
Yes, we are.
Oh, very good. Now we talk about farm to product integrity. So that's integrating the good agricultural practices and also the good manufacturing practices, unified quality management systems, training for farmers and processors, record sharing from field to lab, the audits and compliance checks, all very important. So the two of them, they must work hand in hand. They have to work together. This means shared records, transparent processes, and continued training from seed to sale. Every step must be documented. Regular audits, both GAP and GMP, are upheld. So equally, when you're moving from one country to the other, you'll find Europe, they've got their EU GMP, which means the European Union GMP. So you've got to also adhere to that to make sure that you're compliant, or otherwise they will not accept it. So you get them, they also send their people out to come and inspect your facilities, and they can give a certification to say you are compliant, therefore they'll be able to get products from you. So as long as everything is done properly and followed properly, then there is no problem. So that's the integration of integrating the GEP and the GMP. Right, cannabis in Africa. Look at that beautiful map there. There's the map of Africa, the continent. But unfortunately, we don't have that many countries that have legalized the medicinal cannabis. We've only got a handful, so there's a lot of education that's still needed. So we need to embark on a lot of educating the world. We have launched that as well to say, let's go on a mission to educate people about the medicinal cannabis, the use of it and the relevance of it. There's still a stigma on the continent of this wonderful plant that comes in to give us a lot of therapeutic effects. But the opportunities in Africa, of course, we've got low labor costs and the land availability. We have so much land. So it means the human capital, you cannot even start to even discuss that, because then it's much, much cheaper growing on the continent than anywhere else. So also the affordable of the electricity and also the water is much, much cheaper as we compare with our counterparts on other globally. So the climate also is ideal for growing. The climate is conducive for growing, so we can pretty much grow all year round. We don't experience a lot of the snow and floods and so forth. So you can pretty much control. Also in the climate control greenhouses that we use, you can pretty much control it as well. We've also started looking at growing outside in the open fields. And when we've grown in the open fields, we talked about contaminants and so forth. But now with the latest technology, when it comes to extraction, you have what you call a remedial solution, where you can pull out all the contaminants and you're left with a very clean product. So that's also an advantage. It's also part of the research and development that we're doing, growing indoors, growing outside, growing in the greenhouses, hydroponically, in water, aeroponically. So it's all part of the research and development that we're doing, and partnering with other institutions that also come on board, universities and other institutions, as I said, that also come and help with the research. Africa's competitive advantage in a global market. Africa offers natural advantages for cannabis cultivation. The labor is more affordable, as we said. Land is plentiful, and electricity and water are less expensive. Kind of. I don't know whether everybody will agree with me on the continent, but I think when we compare with our colleagues elsewhere, it's much cheaper. The continent also enjoys a favorable climate, as I said, so it reduces the need for expensive climate control. These factors make Africa one of the most economically viable regions for cannabis production on a global scale. Future outlook, the way forward. Invest in research and genetics, very important. Strengthen policy frameworks, extremely important. Public-private collaboration. At the Global Health Catalyst, we talk about the win-win situation. We always say collaborate, 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 collaborate. That's our motto. So it's all about collaboration. Continental Cannabis Knowledge Hub to be set up that will actually be of very great relevance and importance, which will help a lot. So to grow the sector, we need to embark and continue with the research and development, what we call R&D investments, legal clarity and collaboration, as we said, a Pan-African cannabis hub, which will facilitate training, innovation, and market access, which is very important. There's no point growing it and then you've got no market for it. So it's very important to create an innovation hub. And what can we do? We should build a thriving, ethical cannabis industry rooted in science and sustainability. I did mention earlier to say I could just project. I'm not so sure if I still got a bit of time to project a track and tracing, which I can just go through it very quickly. And also just to thank you for, for participating today. And as we continue and to listen to my colleague, key points, strain selection directly impacts clinical outcomes. The GAP, good agricultural practice, ensures safe, consistent cultivation. The good manufacturing practice, GMP, safeguards product quality during processing. Africa has both the quantity and the responsibility to lead in ethical, sustainable cannabis farming. I'm very mindful of the time, and I'm not so sure if I still got enough time to just project. But tracking and tracing is just a software that we've actually invested in, which we've invested in for tracking from seed to the bedside. So we can actually track our plants from the seeds part of it. So you just QR code scan it, and then you can load everything on this software. So you are able to actually check how many weeks is the plant, and what have you done, you can load everything. What have you fed it with? What is the pH been? What is the temperature been? Have you had any problems with pests and everything? But what is nice about it is by the time you get to the product, you can actually trace back from the bedside, you can trace it back to the cultivation side from the day the seed was put in the grow medium, so which is wonderful. So you're able to trace it back. So you can end up with it in Europe, but you're able to trace it back to where it came from, the source. And if you want to see what was it exposed to, what fertilizers were used, what grow medium was used, what was the temperature, you can even load the cleanliness of the facility. You can even load the number of people that you had in the facility. So you can actually trace it. So also tracking and tracing, very, very important. And I just want to say at this point that I hope you found this information very informative. Let's use this platform to share knowledge and to collaborate. I now hand you over to my colleague, and I think we may have the Q&A at the end, or we may have it at the end of the session after my colleague has spoken. So you can write any questions that you may have, and then we can do a Q&A afterwards. It might make a little bit more sense so that we can actually, in case he might mention something that you also, because everything is interlinked. So there might be a question that will be for both of us, or that will be already my colleague is going to address. So I'll hand over back to Dr. Bilinga to introduce my colleague. Thank you very much for your time. And I look forward for you joining the next session, and several sessions more to come. Keep logging in, keep letting your colleagues know. It's a wonderful platform that we've created. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brilliant. That was a great presentation, meticulous explanation of what medicinal cannabis cultivation entails. And at this moment, without further ado, I will introduce Dr. Dan Widdock to continue with where you have left, and then questions will come later. Dr. Widdock, welcome.
Good morning. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Great. Let me just get myself ready here. Screen is ready, and you can see me fine too. How's that? You can see my screen?
We can see your skin. We can see you. So everything is set to go. Thank you.
You can see me in the screen. Okay. Good morning. I hope everybody's well. It's a pleasure to speak with you all this morning about the fascinating world of genetics and the foundational role they play in cannabis cultivation, along with some of the history, best practices, and a view to the future of cannabis genetics and cultivation. So let's start at the beginning, shall we? Choosing the right genetics. What could be more foundational to your cannabis crop than the seed? So small and unassuming on the outside, but on the inside, boom, the code of life, DNA, genetics. This is basically the blueprint of what is possible with this, let's say, unique seed of opportunity. There are also many varieties of these seeds all over the world. There are many fly-by-night breeders and seed companies also, so beware in choosing your seeds or clones. Do your due diligence wisely. Your crop depends on it. The wrong genetics with the wrong blueprint will lead to the wrong result. So, before we even start a grow, we need to decide what we are trying to accomplish. Is it going to be medicinal objectives, like my colleague just talked about? Would it be recreational, or would it be even industrial? These questions are usually quickly followed by, where do we grow, indoors or out? How do we grow, hydroponically or with soil? And how do we start, with a seed or a clone? The answer to these questions will put you on the right track, on the hunt for the right genetics for your goals. Now, let's move on to a little bit of the history. Genetic research. There are vast amounts of genetic and scientific research on many plants, but not really so for cannabis. And that's due to its illegal status around the world since 1937. As a result, real scientific research did not really get started until later in the game. Dr. Raphael Mechoulam, rest in peace, is the undisputed godfather of cannabis research, best known for his work in isolating tetrahydrocannabinol, also known as THC. He started his research in 1963, which led to his discovery of the human endocannabinoid system, which has effects on many important aspects of human health, as we've just been talking about. Today, genetic mapping is now common in cannabis research. DNA tests help breeders understand which genes are responsible for which traits. And this helps eliminate the guesswork and leads to more stable, reliable seeds for growers. Oh, I'm talking away, and here was the first slide. My apologies. I'm just chattering away here. And now we're on to terminology, nomenclature, and different types of cannabis genetics. So cannabis seeds are organized into different groupings with different names. Different types of seeds or genetics are known as strains, but this is technically a slang or jargon term and technically incorrect, although I will be using it throughout the presentation today. The correct terminology would be cultivar or variety. Beyond this basic term, there are also the differences between cannabis and hemp. We like to say that all hemp is cannabis, but not all cannabis is hemp. and the technical difference being the level of THC. There is very little to no THC in the hemp plant. Then there is the indica, sativa, and hybrid distinction. Broad industry terms referring to genetics that are either offer a bit of a euphoric high, again, as my colleague just went into, and that would be sativa, or a more mellow, potentially sleep-inducing feel, like an indica, or the hybrid, which is a combination of both. Cannabis sativa and cannabis indica are also considered the two primary species of the plant. Thousands of years ago, these species grew naturally in various regions around the world. Sativas thrived in equatorial regions, while indicas flourished more in the temperate climates. Lastly, we have land races, which are the original cannabis plants found naturally occurring in different regions of the world. Interestingly, landrace strains are often named after their regions of origin, like Durban poison or Hindu Kush. Next, we will move on to markets and use cases. As noted earlier, there are different blueprints or genetics for different outcomes. We can group these into three broad categories: medicinal, as my colleague just went into, recreational, and industrial. There are untold numbers of applications for the industrial and industrial hemp, but I won't really go into those today. The focus of this presentation is more farm to bedside and medicinal. So moving on to breeders. Breeders, a key figure in the development of cannabis seeds, aside from Mother Nature, would be the breeders, the cannabis breeders. Original strains or cultivars created naturally by Mother Nature, as mentioned, are known as land race varieties. There are reportedly, There are reportedly more than 30 landrace cannabis strains across the globe. Landrace cultivars originate in countries in South Central Asia, the Middle East, Central and South America, and throughout the African continent. I've mentioned some of the more popular strains already, including Acapulco Gold here and Afghani. Over the last 75 years or so, new breeders have emerged, mostly doing crosses, back crosses, and hybrids of the original landrace cultivars. Again, depending on what you're trying to accomplish would dictate the type of breeder you would want to work with. Some of the more popular breeders today, notorious and famous for these new crosses, would be people like DJ Short, Subcool, Neville Schumacher, etc. The future of cannabis breeding is focused on creating strains with specific effects, tailored cannabinoid and terpene profiles, and enhanced cultivation characteristics. One of the most impressive aspects of cannabis breeding is the ability to isolate minor cannabinoids like CBG and THCV. These compounds are gaining attention for their potential health benefits. Through careful selection, breeders can enhance these compounds while maintaining plant health and consistency. Innovations in genome editing using CRISPR technology are revolutionizing the field by enabling precise genetic modifications. Breeders are also prioritizing sustainability and exploring new techniques like triploid and haploid cannabis. Moving on. Tissue culture. Tissue culture technology has been around agriculture for more than 70 years. Not long ago, tissue culture technology was new to cannabis, but is quickly becoming a standard best practice. Non-tissue cultured clones will not be accepted into the ultra clean room environments of most cannabis cultivation operations. Cannabis tissue culture, also known as micropropagation, is an advanced cloning technique that uses small pieces of plant tissue called explants to grow new plants under sterile and controlled laboratory condition. The explants are put in nutrient-rich agar medium containing hormones that promote cell division and initial growth. This method offers significant advantages over traditional cloning, from cuttings or growing from seed, making it increasingly popular among commercial cannabis cultivators and breeders. Excuse me. Some of the benefits of cannabis tissue culture would include disease and pest-free plants, genetic preservation, space efficiency, scalability and year-round production, and enhanced breeding and research. Moving on. Intellectual property. Oops, I went too far. Back one. Tissue culture. Yes, intellectual property. Many of today's popular varieties are the creation of breeder artists who have given their lives to this craft. The intellectual property they have developed over the years has been left largely unprotected, mostly due to the illegal status of cannabis worldwide. Today, with the advent of legalization worldwide, breeders have the opportunity to protect their IP as the laws take shape and evolve, maybe through copyright, maybe through patent protection, or maybe even on the blockchain. Good segue to our last slide. How could we not talk about the impact of technologies like AI and blockchain on cannabis? From predictive breeding to fully automated agentic grow houses with robots doing the maintenance and harvesting, while agents do all the analytics and take over workflows in the background. From a breeder's perspective, AI can be used to model and predict the genetic outcomes of crosses, optimizing the selection process, and reducing the time and resources needed for strain development. These are just some of the things that the future has in store for us. It's a brave new world. Thank you for listening. This is a great platform. Continue to watch. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dan. That was quite informative. From landrace to modern breeders. Now we know new terminologies.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, thank you. And now it's time for question and answer. If you have questions, any question that you want to ask Dr. Brillin and Dr. Dan, please keep those questions coming, And it was actually very also just looking at Dr. Brillin's presentation where he talks about where she talks about natural pesticides, things like Calendula officinalis, that is marigold. It's a very nice plant, very used for bacterial and fungal infections in human. And now we can see also it's used in plant to fight the same things that could affect plants. That was very good. There was one question that came through, and it says, is the Charlotte Web strain widely available?
I would say yes. Well,
okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I would say yes, relatively speaking, because of the laws right now, it might be hard moving it around the world depending on where it is. So your local market has to offer it, but where it originated from here, it's pretty widely available.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to ask one more question also that is commonly asked question. Who determines the good manufacturing practices and good agricultural practices? And who lays the laws in the different countries, and how do they make sure the laws are implemented? And what are the consequences if these laws are not implemented by the breeders? What happens with the farmers?
I think I'll take that one. The regulatory authority determines the good agricultural practices and also the good manufacturing practices. So when you're applying for your license, you need to say whether you're applying for cultivation only or you're applying for manufacturing. Manufacturing meaning that on your site, you're going to put a manufacturing plant to do all those things that we're talking about. And they're very strict on those rules. Like they can fail you on even just something simple like your airflows to say you haven't got the arrow to say your airflows this direction. And if you fell short, because remember they also do random spot checks where they can come anytime at midnight or whatever time they choose to come, and they can revoke your license immediately if you're not compliant. So they're very strict about it, which is good thing that they do it anyway, so that we don't have like, your Mickey Mouses and from the back of the lorry trying to just then jump onto it and do the wrong thing. So it's properly regulated by the governing authorities. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does answer the question.
I could add to that. More broadly speaking, just like the question about availability, this is a new industry, and the laws and the rules and regulations are different everywhere, different in countries, and in countries like the US, different in every state almost. So that's something to be aware of going into this business, is that, laws, regulations, even some of these things we talked about, GAP, GMP, are relative to where you're operating. Some of them have to be self-enforced, running good manufacturing process and good agricultural processes. Other places, there will be a regulatory body overseeing it, enforcing.
Just also to add to that, Dr. Belinga, the International Narcotic Board also governs those laws. So remember I mentioned it earlier that they also can tell you how much each country is allowed. So you're given a quota, so to speak, to say South Africa you're allowed so much, and in Nigeria so much, Ghana so much, the US is allowed so much, so that it's all under a control system. So they're quite strict on that as well. So they're also part of the whole regulatory exercise. So that one is INCB, International Narcotic Board. They sit out in Vienna.
Also, there is another question from Stanley. There are actually two questions. The first question is, when cultivating is security an issue? And the second question is, can CRISPR improve cultivation? How? And is there a concern on what may result?
What was the first question, please?
I couldn't understand the first one either.
When cultivating is security an issue?
When is cultivation?
Yeah, security an issue. I think that's what the person tried to say.
Why is it a security issue? Maybe I can answer the first part and then Dan can answer the second part. It's a security issue because, as you know, it's a narcotic. So it's if they don't do strict security measures, it's a problem, because then you can actually have people even coming into the farm and breaking down and to try and take the product. And the black market is huge out there. So the product can end up on the black market, and that's not what's needed. So it's a controlled substance. So it falls under the controlled substance, back again to the INCB. So it's controlled and regulated by the governing authorities. So the security of it is of paramount importance from where you're growing it, where you're storing it, and when you're transporting it. So that's all forms part of the whole security aspect. So you have to be very strict. Like on our farm, we've put like lots of CCTV cameras. You can't just come on the farm and just leave anyhow. Very strict measures. So it's very important.
And on the second question, the questioner asked about CRISPR technology and how it could impact agriculture and what might the outcomes of that be. So yes, CRISPR technology can have a big impact on cultivation in areas like clipping out, so to speak, clipping out with CRISPR characteristics that you don't want in the plant, and maybe even inserting ones that you do want. For example, drought resistance, yield, these type of things. You can find plants that have really strong characteristics there and put them in another plant. So that's how it could impact it. Then you have gene modification and gene editing. I think gene modification is what people are most scared about, taking genes from other plants and putting them in. That's what I think the question is going to. What could that result in? Who knows? That's why people are nervous. So some of the outcomes of gene editing, or I should say gene modification, we don't entirely know. But the things we do know is it gives us advantages in cultivation and marketing these products. But playing around with Mother Nature can be a little dangerous.
Okay, I now have one question, right? I am into the productions of antibody fusion proteins, and when we produce our antibody, we can use many production systems, whether it's a mammalian, whether it's a yeast. I would like to know, can we use cannabis plants for the productions of antibody fusion protein?
Can we use cannabis plants for antibody fusion protein?
Protein, yes.
Yeah, in yeast or in mammals. I think it would actually form part of the research that we're doing because nobody has actually embarked on that as yet. But I'm sure that if research is done, so we can ask our clinicians, our academians, our research scientists to try and do it that way. We know that you can combine it with other drugs and so forth, but for the fusion in the yeast and so forth, we have not actually tried embarking on that. But I think it could be something that we could certainly explore and look at it. As we mentioned earlier, it's all research and development. So the more research is done, the more outcomes we can get. So I'm sure it will be possible. For now, we cannot say, yes, you can or you can't, but I think it could be something that can certainly be explored by our colleagues.
Thank you.
Really like it, these control measures. So then it makes it very easy for us to do research and to reproduce this research. Again, I have one more question for you. Does harvest time or method of cultivation, like the fertilizer used, climate, affect the yield or the chemical constituents of cannabis, the yield that we get?
Most definitely, it does. We've also noticed that strains that are grown in the Northern Hemisphere, when we grow them in the Southern Hemisphere, they produce certain different characteristics. And let's say, for example, the THC content is low, like at 0.3%. By the time we grow it in the Southern Hemisphere, we call it heating up. You end up with something that's got like 5%. And surprise, surprise, the regulatory authority will pounce on you because then you are allowed on the hemp to have X amount percentage of THC, like 0.2. They're trying to bring that number up in South Africa, for example. But then now you get it from Europe and then you get it here. Then the next thing it jumps to 4%. So definitely different ecological environments affect the characterization of the plants. So, and also the different fertilizers can also affect the THC and CBD percentages as well. So that's why it's very important that you track and you trace everything that you use so that if there are any variables, you'll be able to know as part of your pheno hunt. Then you know what is resistant to this fertilizer and what likes this climate and so forth. Yes.
Okay.
So it does.
Two other questions. So one question is asking what will be the best starting point for countries where medical cannabis is yet to be legalized?
Best starting point is, I guess it's a very controversial subject. So in South Africa, the whole story started in 2014 with a minister who had cancer. And he went to Parliament one day and he said to the sitting president, Mr. President, if I had not taken cannabis this morning, I would not be sitting here in Parliament. So the president paused the whole session and looked at him, and he did shed a tear and said, oh, so this man explained the amount of excruciating pain he feels. So from 2014, then, of course, they started on the whole journey to see how they can actually legalize it for medicinal use. So from 2014 till about 2018, they then put the framework in place and then allowed people to put in their applications. And 2019, we started getting, like, we one of the first of the 3 in the country to get a medicinal cannabis license here in South Africa. So 2019 is when they started their audits, and 2020 is when we successfully got our medicinal permit. There's still a little bit of a gray area, I call it, because they're looking at legalizing it recreationally. So they are saying you are allowed to grow in your own private space for your own personal use as an individual. So there's still at that point now where personal use, how much can you grow and how is it regulated and so forth. But for medicinal, they've now issued the licenses, they're issuing the licenses, but also to add to that, if a patient goes to the doctor and say they're suffering, let's say multiple sclerosis, the doctor writes a motivation to the regulatory authority for a Section 21 permit. That Section 21 permit allows you to buy smokable flower. So you are allowed to then buy to get a script, and then you can actually write to say which facility is going to produce and provide you with the flower, and you're allowed to buy the flower and smoke that as per prescription.
Was
I
that
hope that answers.
was that what is it looking for? Because there's another answer. I'd say that's the kind of emotional background medicinal approach, which I think is the right approach. Then there's also how you commercially start this industry. And we actually talked about this yesterday, and it's back to the talks here. It all starts with the genetics. If I were a country or a state or somebody starting to open up this business, you should really start with the genetics. You know, the country or the regulatory authority or body should start vetting and bringing in genetics from around the world and start with nurseries. This is the problem I see in most countries and states in the US. They bypassed the nursery and the seed, the foundation, and started giving out licenses for grow. And where do people get the basic starting material to grow? Now nurseries are emerging, but early on, you have to go to the gray market. The right way to start, as we've said here today, is with the genetics in any possible way. And if you want to have control, you bring in the right genetics, you register them, you organize them, and then you put them out in the market. The way it's happening today is very willy-nilly, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Again,
perhaps I can just. No, okay, sorry.
Go. You go.
Now, I was just going to say I could add to that actually as well. The 2 cultivars that have been researched in South Africa, but there's still a little bit of a delay for registering those 2. So you can now apply for a permit to bring in genetics from like Spain. We brought in from Spain. We brought in from Lesotho. The Lesotho ones had come from the US. So you're allowed to now apply to the Department of Agriculture. So the seed belongs to the Agriculture Department. The product belongs to the Department of Health. So the 2 of them work together. So until when there's a product, the seed and the plant, there's no problem with it. That can be controlled by the Department of Agriculture. Only when you decarboxylate it, as we term it, to activate it to become an active ingredient, then it becomes a narcotic, and it becomes in the hands of the Department of Health.
I also want to add on that knowledge is power. For those countries that don't know more about cannabis, now we have research papers that have been published. That is a good start. Let us start from there. Let us read what publication is out there that support medical use of cannabis. Let us write to the government, because as scholars, if you don't write, if you don't start putting information together and go with the correct information to the authorities, then they will not know what exists. But if you come together, if you put something substantial, and if you even put like the research methods that you'll employ just to start with a pilot study and approach any government facilities, the authorities, and you tell them, oh, this is what we have, this is what has been done, and this is the pilot study which we want to do, and this is how it's going to be controlled. And if we come up with results, then you present the same results that you come up. If you come with a proposal with a good plan and you approach, then I think you'll get answers. But if you shy away, you will never know. you'll never know if this can be implemented in your country. So let us come together, let us do research, and this platform is providing us with it, with the same tools, with the same information that you can use to put together at the end of this course. You should be able to go and look for more information or put together the information that you'll have acquired from here. Come together as a body, go and present it to the authorities, to the boards that are necessary, and see what you come up with. There's always a start and there's always something. Let us get the ball rolling. Thank you.
Okay. There are two other questions. One is asking how are manufacturers of phytomedicine inspected and certified?
Those are also inspected by the regulatory authority. Like, for example, in South Africa, we've got what's called South Africa Product Health Regulatory Authority. So they also very, very strict in their audits as well. And they do random checks also. And you've got to submit regularly some paperwork, some documentation. It then becomes like any other drug. It becomes like your Panadol, your tinctures, your capsules that you use for anything. It then is classified. So the way those are regulated, that's exactly how they're also regulated. But these manufacturing also plants, they are also registered specifically for cannabis. So even if they were manufacturing other drugs, they still get another audit which is also specific to cannabis, to say, do they have safe storage facilities and so forth as well? Because as you know, it's a very high value product. So they've got to inspect and then also make sure that they've got safe storage facilities and so forth. But it's also regulated like any other medicine.
Okay. Another question is, cannabis cultivation can result in different percentage or composition. So what are the best cultivation practices to avoid this, as it can impact users?
You want to take it then?
Let me hear that again, please.
Cannabis cultivation can result in different percentages or compositions. So what are the best cultivation practices to avoid this, as it can impact users?
I'd say, well, that's okay. Good question. That's a good question. Right now, there's an issue of stability and consistency in the industry with regard to the end result, the plant. That goes back to genetics again. The problem is the seeds to genetics in this industry are not stable. So you have new breeders constantly, you're basically on version 1 of many of these genetics. You need to get to version 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 until the seed stabilizes, which is how it works in modern agriculture. You take a pack of seeds, it grows the same plant, it's all the same thing. It's not really the case in cannabis yet. Over time, we're going to stabilize seeds and they'll be more consistent. In the short run, that's why we use clones. So
Yeah.
if you take a clone from a plant, a cutting, it's the exact replica. That's how you get consistency. In terms of best practice right now, best practice in a way is indoor because it's more controlled, and it's through cloning because you got the consistent product. And now cloning has come to a new level with the tissue culture technology we talked about. Rather than just taking clippings from a mother plant, which is kind of out in the open, susceptible to disease, you're doing these things at more of a very small microscopic level in really sterile environments. So I'd say stabilization of seeds over time, and in the interim, tissue culture and cloning technology or micropropagation technology.
Yeah.
Okay, I have another question back to this. So I watched a show a few weeks ago where there was an expert on agriculture who was mentioning that monoculture is damaging to the soil when people do monoculture over a long period of time. My question is, does the composition of the soil impact the percentage composition of the cannabis, even with this 10th generation clone that you are mentioning? Will the composition of the soil impact that composition, or does the soil has to be like approximately the same to kind of standardize or optimize this to a specific like percentage or whatever active component that we want?
I would say
Um,
a simple answer is almost everything is going to impact it in some way. If you have stable genetics, that's going to be the baseline. But I mean, if there's something in the soil, um, a large amount of something in the soil, it could have an impact on the plant. I mean,
but also just
I think that's the challenge of phytomedicine and why pharma emerged is like these are plants and almost everything affects them. Like even on the plant itself, you've got the top buds, the middle buds, and the bottom buds. They're not all going to be the same. These are plants. So I'd say if you have the right genetics, it might have little effect, but almost everything is going to affect the plant in some way. Maybe in minuscule ways, but all these things matter. The microbes in the soil, the nutrients in the soil. Was the soil depleted? If you're not using soil and you're using hydroponics, now you're injecting nutrients. What's the formula? Everybody's using different formulas. Actually, they're using different formulas because they believe their formula is going to achieve the magic outcome. Everybody's using a different combination of nitrogen and seaweed and all kinds of things in their fertilizer concoctions to maximize the outcome because they believe all the inputs have some kind of effect. Maybe small, but that's the idea of hydro versus soil and using different types of nutrients. Everybody's competing for a different effect.
Yeah, just to add to that as well, I mentioned it earlier as well when I was giving my speech earlier, that using different grow mediums also impacts on the outcome of your plant. So that's why you find putting soil in a pot, that's like almost constricting it, because soil is used to like masses of a lot of space. So when you now put it inside a confined place, the root permeation also changes. And so it certainly does also matter how you grow it and where you're growing it and what, like Dan has said, what nutrients are you putting and whether you're putting perlite, which will allow a lot of water to drain out so it's not waterlogged and so forth. And like you're rightly saying, like mono, yes, meaning that you're growing it over time. So all the nutrients, where are they going? If you put it in an open field, they're staying there. And when you now plant something else, that can also affect another plant. So that's why it's important as part of the research and development that you can do hydroponics, you can do aeroponics, you can do coir, you can do the perlite, you can do the soil, you can also add some rocks, some stones in the soil or sand to make it a bit looser so that at least it's not restrictive. They also grow bags. You got plastic ones, you've also got cloth bags as well, which makes a difference. So you can also grow in a cloth bag. So we are sort of like embarking on different growing methods so that you can come up with like the best one that gives you the best results. So that's also part of being a good grower. So you have to do these things to see what grows the best and what fertilizers work the most. I mean, we've tried from other different suppliers and found that when we send them for testing, we found arsenic. And you don't want that in your fertilizers because the product was, when we tested the product, we found some arsenic in it. And then we thought, no, what could it be? We tested the water, we tested everything else, and then we narrowed down to the fertilizer. So that's why it's very important that even your suppliers, they give you information about their product as well, so that you've got some lab results, but at the same time, you also test it as well yourself. So there are different ways of growing, so many ways of skinning a cat. So it's now up to the cultivator, up to the farmer, how you going to proceed and what's not going to cost you a lot of money and get you confused. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Another question,
Yeah.
when discussing the future outlooks, Prof. Dan mentioned use of AI prediction. My question is, in case there is wrong AI prediction, who is to be held accountable? And then the second question, is the Charlotte Web strain patented?
On the first one, as they say in the data world, or maybe in the world in general, garbage in, garbage out. AI is built on what's known as large language models, LLMs, or small language models. That's based on data that's being fed to that large language model. If you feed the large language model questionable data, you're going to get questionable answers. So, and who's held accountable? I'd say the people building the large language models. If you're building the model and you're feeding it with bad data, it gives hallucinogenic outcomes or bad answers. I mean, you could blame them. Right now, unfortunately, it's like cannabis and a lot of other things. There's nobody to blame. It's all brand new, and it's also blockchain, cannabis, AI. They're all the Wild West. But the advantages of being able to comb through all that data, like the implications for research in medicine alone and cannabis, is unbelievable. Even more in medicine where there's more good data. Here in cannabis, there's less good data, but as more and more data comes out, nothing is going to be able to plow through that data like artificial intelligence, no human mind. And no human mind can correlate different things like the AI can. So untold potential and discoveries should come out of AI as long as we feed it with good information. And then the second part I can leave to you, Doctor. You're on mute. I think you're still on mute.
You're still muted, Dr. Brilliant?
Yes, in 2013, if I'm not mistaken, the Charlotte's Web is the Charlotte's Web Holdings, and it was founded by the Stanley brothers in 2013 in Colorado, and they did get a patent for it. So it is there, it's known. So it's something that one can look into if you want to look at it. And they've tested it was tested more than 20 times from what they said. So it's something that has been like looked into and researched and everything. So yes, it is. There's actually a website, if you go www.charlottesweb.com, so you can read a little bit more about it as well.
Yep.
So yeah, you can actually have a look and on the website and read about it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're not here to market it
In-
anyway, by the way. We're just referencing some of the things that are written. So, so we're not saying that's the best strain. There are many, many millions of strains. So that have also valuable effects, and a lot of research is going. So that one just a reference point, just an example to say this is how far we're going in this field.
Thank you so much. Dr. Flory, do we have any more questions from your side?
No, but I want just to send a message to the Francophone attendant because there was an issue with the translation, and I will just address them 1 minute, a few seconds in French. Bonsoir à tous encore et encore merci d'avoir participé à la présentation d'aujourd'hui. Nous tenons à nous excuser encore s'il n'y a pas pu avoir des sous-titres en français. Nous avions encore eu un problème technique. Toutefois, nous posterons cette vidéo sur YouTube et vous aurez l'option de pouvoir le traduire en français. Et aussi, nous allons convertir la version de cette vidéo anglais en français à tous nos participants. Encore merci et désolé pour cette situation. Merci. I am done. Yeah.
Merci
Thank you so
beaucoup.
much.
Merci beaucoup.
I'll give 2 minutes or 3 minutes to Dr. Carrillo, who wants to say something. Dr. Carrillo, welcome.
Is she connected?
I think we have to put her as a participant. Let me just do that right now.
Okay, just give us a few minutes
Yes.
as we put her through.
Mhm.
There
Well,
she is.
no,
should
is she
be-
on?
Okay.
Oh, there she comes.
Hello, everybody. Thank you. Thank you so much for this enlightening presentation, Dr. Berlin, and also for Dan. And I want to say to the audience that these are the grounds where, as physicians or as practitioners, we have to start. Sometimes people says, "Oh, I am a physician, I'm a doctor. I really don't care about the cultivation process." Of course, we care because we need to know where is the medicine we're giving to our patients coming from and how important, and that is the compliance of the cultivation and the licensed producers have. because it's based on that we're gonna have products that are safe and effective. So this is very important, and for the audience that is part of the healthcare professionals, this is a very, very important class, because we have to see where the medicine is coming from, what the standards. This is not, and this is taken very serious all over the world. The standards that the medicine has to go through in order to become a medicine. And just because it's people says, oh, it's a plant, so it's natural, doesn't mean that it doesn't need to have the rigorosity of good agricultural practices and all the standards that Berlin and Dan mentioned. So these are the grounds where us as physicians, we feel comfortable and we feel confident when we're going to prescribe products. And I always say this: if you're going to prescribe to a patient, make sure that your product is coming from a reliable source that is backed, or that it has the seal of the Ministry of Health or the regulatory entity in your country, because sadly there is a lot of mislabeling, there is a lot of contamination in the products, there is a lot of speculation, and if the licensed producers and the agricultural practices are not followed step by step, the way Berlin and Dan were mentioning in here, we will have a disaster. We have already cases of patients with aspergillosis, with contamination, with heavy metals, with neurotoxicity, with mycotoxins, with a lot of side effects caused for the product not to be treated since the very beginning, as our title says, from the farm to the bedside. So every single minute, every single second since you put the seed in the ground matters, because it's about safety and efficacy. So thank you so much to both of you for this great presentation.
Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much, Dr. Sandra. I don't know, maybe Dr. Belinga, you might want to just tell the audience who Dr. Sandra is. I did reference her earlier.
Dr. Sandra is medical practitioner, doctor, but also is a professor at the University of Columbia, the University of Columbia, and is on the forefront when it comes to treating patients with medical cannabis. And he has been obtaining good results from it, and he's one of the speakers of this session. So she'll be talking to you more on patient control, and what research has been doing. I think from module 5, but module 4 and 5. And next week we are tackling module 3, which will be on extraction and formulation techniques. And the person who will be taking us through this module is going to be Professor Katerere, who has done so much work in the extraction processes. Remember the first module, we told you these modules are building up. The first module, we talked about phytomedicine in general, and we gave you an umbrella perspective. And we told you what from farm to bedside means. Today, as Dr. Carrillo has put it very nice and plainly, every step of the way matters. Every information is critical, because the end product will end up in a human body, and we want it to treat patients. So every lecture, do not miss any of these lectures. Today we are coming from the farm, and we are going to the manufacturing process, which is the extraction and the formulation technique. And from there, we'll go now. Once we have manufactured this drug, what do we want it to do? And this will be used in the patient body. So do not miss out any of this session. You have seen how important it is. Invite your other medical practitioner, invite other people who wants to go to the industrial part of it. There's so much information that can never be missed. So with that, we thank you, Dr. Brelin, we thank you, Dr. Dan, Prof. Carrillo, And even Flory, wherever you are, we thank you. And the technical team. And also Prof. Will, who's in the background with us. We want to thank you. These are the people who have made this possible. So bye. Let us meet next week. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Breland, Sandra. See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Dan.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Talk more
Thank
later.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Cheerio.